Welcome to the Wayne Public Library's virtual author chat. My guest today is Anna DePalo. Anna is the USA Today bestselling author of more than 15 contemporary romance novels, which have been published around the world. She is also a member of the New Jersey Romance Writers. Anna's newest book, So Right with Mr. Wrong, will be released this month and is part of the Serengeti Brothers series. Welcome, Anna. Please tell us a little bit about your new book.
My newest book is out this month. It's called So Right with Mr. Wrong. I wish I could take credit for the title, but it was dreamed up by my publishing team at Harlequin Books. And it is a part of the Serengeti Brothers series. It's actually about the last sibling, Mia Serengeti. And she's a fashion designer in New York, and it's a enemies to lovers romance. She basically runs into the son of a family that is a rival to the Serengetis in the construction business back home.
Okay, and I know this is the fourth in the Serengeti series. No other siblings, but any other offshoots do you see in the future, or is this is the end of the series?
It's the end of the siblings. Let's put it that way. I've already written a short story about a cousin, so I haven't. I'm hoping to expand it. Yes, beyond the immediate family. They are Italian after all, as am I. So there will be an extended. There is extended family. Whether how many of them actually get to speak and have their own story is something else.
Okay, and is there something you can tell us about the book that isn't in the blurb, like? Maybe how many of the past characters are we going to see in the books, or anyone stand out?
Well, there are all the past characters are in the book. I do want to say, and this comes up, a series of very popular now in the romance genre. The book can be read alone. You do not need to read them in order, and the past protagonists of the first three books do make an appearance, as well as the parents, the Serengeti parents. The mother has a cooking show that was about to be canceled. But anyway, that's a secondary plot line. So yeah, that's all I want. I don't want to give too much away about the book, but I actually constructed for myself I don't know if you can see this. Those are all 4 titles, a handy, just so I don't forget what the names are. But those are the 4 books now, and I'm very pleased with the artwork that was done on them.
I was going to ask you, how much input, because you mentioned the title not having too much input. How much input on the covers or the titles have you had? Like, what was the original title, or do you give it an original title for this one?
For the books, the way Harlequin works, my publisher, is they take suggestions for. They do what's called an art fact sheet, and they do take suggestions for what the hero and heroine will look like. But they ultimately work from that and sometimes use their own models, or do some stock photos, and so I think they got it fairly close to what what these people were supposed to look like.
Nancy says your covers for this series have been dynamite. They are really nice. By chance, we do have it. I did create a flyer with the first three are available to library patrons on a Hoopla, which was one of the downloadable audio and ebooks that we have. And so I made a flyer pointing them in that direction before they could come today and meet you. Or as you know, since we're recording it, they can always catch up on this on our YouTube channel or locally on our cable channel. But they can read all four of them. I have ordered for the library, so you can catch up and read before the new one comes out this month. And you mentioned Harlequin. Harlequin has a very unique model. Like yours is the Desire line, if I saw correctly. Have all of your books been published in the Desire line, or just these four? Tell us a little bit about that.
So, yes, I have not moved around. I started publishing, this is my 16th book out this month. I started publishing with Harlequin Desire and stayed with them. It was a, an imprint that I was comfortable with. And the way that Harlequin is the biggest, they do more than romance, but they're the biggest romance publisher out there. And they cater to different tastes. This book is sort of their sexy, well, let me go with what they said. They're powerful, passionate, provocative line of books. So there is a particular feel to them. And I found that was where my voice and my style fit the best. Although I probably do write sort of more romantic comedy like for this line than maybe some of their other writers do, who tend to be a little heavier on drama.
That question from Nancy is, where does the Desire line fall in heat level within Harlequin?
Well, it's definitely considered one of their more high heat lines, let's put it that way, along with Harlequin Presents, which is probably the what people are most familiar with. It's their one of the oldest, or one of the oldest lines they have. So they have other types of books under different imprints that, like Harlequin Romance, that are sweeter in tone. They have a suspense line. They have a historical romance line. There are several of them now. They usually have 10 or 12, running at the same time, just to, and people do, readers do bounce around among them, depending on, what their mood is, or what they enjoy reading. It doesn't have to be just one thing.
Nancy says, thank you for the explanation of the Harlequin lines. So when did you start writing? Like, how long ago? Like, not just professionally, but how long ago did you start the love of writing?
I was always a big reader. Let me start there. And of course, like a lot of readers, I think writers grow out, or they're like sort of a subgenre of the reader universe, right? I haven't met a writer yet who was not a big reader first. So, except a lot of us take detours, right? And my detour was I graduated from law school. I was an economics major as an undergrad at Harvard, and then I went to law school. And about the time that I graduated from law school, I had sort of a bucket list, and one of them was publishing a book. So I was in the bookstore, went to the publishing section, uh, found that in one of the appendices that there's an organization called Romance Writers of America, and I joined. I started attending local chapter meetings, and I was working 60 hours a week, but, but I found squeezed in time in the evenings and the weekends slowly to finish a book. And what happened next? I met these lovely people at New Jersey Romance Writers, and I went to their first conference, and the manuscript. I can admit to this now because it's been a long time, but it was not quite finished, the manuscript, okay, or the work in progress. Nevertheless, somebody encouraged me to take an editor appointment and pitch the book, and it was requested, and so then I worked furiously to finish it. It was submitted, and then a few months later, I heard back. I think I was engaged at the time. And my husband, my now husband, said, you know, that's probably the most excited I've seen you. And of course, I denied it. But anyway, and that book came out in, I believe, 2003. So that is my publishing journey. That's well one version of my publishing journey.
Were you the before college, before law school? Like, were you the person who was like writing stories and just like as a teenager or even younger than that, or were you just reading, consuming, and then the ideas just started to flow, kind of like, oh, I could do this, or um,
So that's a good question. I think I made a couple of stabs at writing. I was not somebody who filled a lot of journals with fiction writing, but slowly over time, I had, you know, come to realize that I really just enjoy the process of writing, most types of writing. So, throughout school, I was writing papers. In college, I wrote a thesis. In law school, I wrote a law school note. As an attorney, I wrote briefs. And so I thought it was going to come actually more easily to switch over to fiction. But it was actually harder than I thought. Even though my first completed manuscript was published, um, I think I've grown as a writer since then, over 16 books. But I will say two things. One is, you know, the couple of stabs I made at writing fiction early on were not very good. And I was like, well, I'm just not suited to be, just not fated to be a fiction writer, right? Uh, and that's what I want to tell people, that, I truly believe that most writers of fiction are made and not born. So I did not realize that, how much it is just investing the time, especially early on, in crafting a manuscript and learning as you go, because that's really what it's about. It's like the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours, put, put in the time.
Mhm.
So um, I will that I think that stopped me in the beginning, but once I realized that um, you can improve, you can learn. It's a process. I stuck with it. And then the second thing is, aside from what happened after law school, is, and I've said this before, I guess maybe being virtual and in the middle of a pandemic lets people be more, forthright or um, open. But my parents were immigrants, and my grandfather was illiterate, and so I think all along I had this idea that I wanted to check off some items on my list, that things that they never got to do. And one of them was, getting an education, going to college, going to grad school, becoming a professional, and writing a book. So, and I've always, because of that, really appreciated the um, uh, the specialness of being able to read, knowing how to write, and on top of it, being published and having other people read your words.
Um, just kind of ask, what kind of writer are you? Are you like a big plotter, or are you more, as the term, the pantser? Because I would think the dialogue, that witty dialogue and the banter, that kind of, does it play in your head and then just like you get it on the page, or
Have
which
you,
one are you?
have you peeked at my books, Janet?
I did read a little bit. Yes.
um, yes, thank you. So, yes, the wit and the banter. So, that's a good question. I think that's about finding your writer voice, right? I always strive to entertain, uh, to elicit emotion in the reader, and to make them laugh. I'm just a lighthearted type of writer. And um, so, to answer your question, the macro stuff I do plan out a little bit. I have a synopsis that I usually use, that I have to basically put together. It's a brief outline in order to sell the book to my publisher. So that might be 4 to 6 pages, and it's just gives the general idea of who the main characters are and what the plot is. And then when I start writing, my process has changed. I used to write books in Word, Microsoft Word. Now I use a software program called Scrivener. So I try to map out generally what the skeleton is, create chapters of what I think those scenes should be, plop down scenes in each chapter, and um, whose point of view those scenes are going to be in. And usually I have a pretty good idea, at least in my head, about getting myself through the opening, the first 3 chapters or so, up to the first turning point, where things sort of like it's you take the plunge and it's a point of no return. So, um, but after that, it's kind of seat of your pants, right? And I sit in front of the computer, and I sit, and I sit some more. And some days, it's like the words start flowing right before you need to get up, right? the rest of your life calls. And some days they just flow. It's the way I try to, and over time, over the years, I've come up with interesting, um, you know, tricks to how call the muse. So one of them is uh, thinking about the story in the shower, going to bed, thinking about the story, so that I'm sort of ruminating over it overnight. Maybe I'll wake up with an idea. Um, Smelling essential oils. And I don't know if you can see behind me, but I've been writing since I grew up in Brooklyn, and once I moved out to the suburbs, I was writing in the sunroom, which unfortunately doesn't have a door. So, and I had kids, and sometimes they would interrupt me and things like that. But the other thing I do recommend to people is the visual element. I know some writers create Pinterest boards, some kind of visual so that they can up their setting or their characters or whatever. So I finally bought myself I don't know if you can see behind me, a trifold, and it has a built-in clips, and right now they're blank. But you just hang stuff there, and my idea is I will swivel around and take a look and be inspired.
Nice. Very good. Wow, that's a good one. I like it.
Yeah.
Um, sorry. I got into that a little bit. So I was going to ask you, did you always read romance, or did you read any other genres, or did you read romance at all? Like, was that your favorite?
I've read romance since I was a tween, I think, and I've always liked it. I felt like um, the romance genre explores the nuances of human relationships more than some other genres do. And to the extent that we all turn to books uh, in order to learn about life and how people interact and things like that, I think it was a you know good way a good way into that. Um, and the other thing I have to say about romance is that usually it has usually been the case in most situations that the female protagonist is at the center of the story, and that is not true as much in a lot of other genres. Um, Having said that, I will say I enjoyed a lot of things. I read a lot of nonfiction these days. I do read romance. I read, from when I was a kid, I went through a big fantasy phase, sci-fi, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, Isaac Asimov. Um, Although I don't I will say something about Isaac Asimov, which is that he's a prolific writer, which I think a lot of popular fiction writers admire. When people ask me about whether popular fiction like romance is realistic, I always say, Isaac Asimov wrote about like little green men, literally. So I think that you can use different avenues and still get to the same destination as far as reaching people and communicating a message.
True. To say true. That's a good um, analogy. Like, why does I'm a big advocate of romance. So I'm like, why does romance get picked on so much when, they suspend belief for all these other genres?
Right.
So I was going to ask, how did is there a part of writing that you like, that you enjoy more than another? And what's the hardest part for you? What's your day like?
Okay. I think the hardest part is all of it. But the hardest part is, I think there's always a point in a book where things become frustrating, right? Because most of us are not, most books are a long-term project. And, um, you've got to have some stick-to-itness. That's part of the reason that, you know, um, uh, most people don't finish a book. So, what else will I say? Um, so I guess the middle is the hardest part. Um, I usually know the way it's going to end. I usually know the way it's going to start, and I'm in a hurry to get from one to the other. But there's this bog in between, and so the easiest part is the excitement of uh, the new idea, and the easiest part is actually holding the published book in your hands and meeting readers and getting feedback and all that fun stuff, even though I'm basically an introvert.
Many writers are. Many writers. I thank you for appearing on Zoom. I mean, I'll be honest, librarians aren't very out there either. So getting on Zoom and being recorded is, not the easiest thing always. But I'm glad. I'm glad. I think it's important um, to kind of get this background on what writing, how much effort and how much time goes into writing, and how the authors actually go through the process. And I talk about it a lot when I have my book discussion groups, because of kind of being involved in writers groups and knowing. But so I thank you for appearing um, before and being recorded. Um, what would you, if you had a bit of advice for a new writer, what advice would you give them?
This goes back to what I said earlier, which is that it's a process, and you finishing the first manuscript is only the beginning of the process. Um, you will see yourself improve over time. Um, so I think there's got to be, at least at the beginning, there's a big learning curve. There's got to be some stick-to-itness. And, we live in a very busy world, a loud world with lots of distractions. And I think that works against um, finishing a book, frankly. Um, you need that time in the chair, with your butt in the chair, and without interruption. It's hard to get that for most people. Some people are, um, lucky enough to be able to go to a writing retreat. And I think there's this idea that a lot of people have, that everything, the circumstances have to be perfect in order for you to write a book. You have a long stretch of vacation. You go to a writer's retreat in the middle of nowhere. You quit your day job. You your kids grow up. You don't have any older relatives to take care of. And that's really just not the case for most people. And so I think it's, you know, just have it, putting in the time, carving out that time, whatever it is, in the morning, on the commute, on the run. Um, you know, I prefer to write on a desktop, but I will say in a pinch, I've used my phone. I have apps on my phone and I type in there. People do dictate. So there are many, many ways to get to get those words down.
That's true. Very good. Very good. Is there anything you're working on next that you want to tell us about? What's going to fill those clips behind you?
Well, I've been working on stuff related to the Serengeti series. The secondary relatives. Well, I don't want to call them secondary. They don't consider themselves secondary. Let's say extended family. um, so that is that's what I'm working on. Where I want to take this. If at all. I'm so glad this last sibling book is out. Readers that have had asked for it, and I finished it during the pandemic. My kids were home from, you know, everybody was home. My husband, my kids, they were all working and schooling from home. So it's a bit of a challenge, but I'm glad I got it done.
We're glad too. We're very glad. If there are any questions, if anybody has a question for Anna, if you wanted to type it into the chat, I can read it to her.
So the setting, actually,
Where is it set?
where is it set and what influenced it?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, so the whole Serengeti series is set in a fictional town in western Massachusetts near Springfield called Wellsdale. Except Mia is sort of a rebel, so she's moved to New York, which is also, a big fashion. She's wants to be a fashion designer, so that's where the action is. So she moves to New York. So this last book kind of toggles back and forth between the two places. What inspired it? Okay, so I'm a native New Yorker, and I also went to college in Massachusetts. So I took the two, mashed them together, and then because I wanted a place that people could relate to, but not be so tied down to the details of a particular place. Like I thought Springfield might be too big, not different enough from New York, that I made up a fictional town. So, I don't want to say that it sounds weird to say that I cheated by making something up for a made up book. But some people like real places. Some people do fictional places. So that's what inspired it. I kind of knew both environments, and a lot. I think maybe with a couple of exceptions, all of my books have been set in either Massachusetts or New York. I think the banter in some of in my books, and the 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 comebacks, and the snappy dialogue. I think that probably has a New York flavor to it. But I think, uh, of course, humor, transcends a lot of boundaries.
I remember, like, I've learned a little bit about Harlequin and their lines, but so you had 4 parts, and did you get it Was it as a, I'm going to come up with 4 parts, or was it the individual books that you sold to your editor? Um,
So that's a good question because I guess I'm in the minority here. Trilogies are well known. I like books of 4. I don't know why, but I do. The first 4 books I wrote were 4 siblings, and this latest is a series of 4 involving 4 siblings. And I don't think that there's a particular, expectation in the market as far as how many books are going to be in a series. I will say, things have definitely evolved from the time when people just wrote one book and then came up with a completely different concept for another book.
mhm.
I mean, maybe a few years later you get a sequel if the book did well. These days, I don't want to say that publishing has gone Hollywood, but you know how there's like a franchise like X-Men and whatnot reboots. And I think the same sort of thing has happened in publishing. So I think you'll see anything from 2 books to trilogies, 4 books, and authors who are up to 19 or 20 books. Usually, it doesn't start out like that. Usually there's a. I'm not sure if I know of any author who's envisioned more than 1 to 9 books. I think it's pretty hard to think of somebody who envisioned 10 or more books from the get-go. And that includes J.K. Rowling, who I know plotted out everything. But yeah, so that's that. I hope that answers your question. So yes, there isn't an expectation. I think there's usually an expectation that you're going to turn in, 1 book, and then, oh, hey, you have an idea that's related to that book, or you want to do something with, the cousin or the best friend, or when readers write to you and say, I want so and so to have a happily ever after, or I want to see what that happens in their life, and so that's where things go from there.
Okay. Roma asks, how far in advance does the marketing process start before each book is released?
Okay, so usually it's a minimum of 6 months or so from when you have a publication date and when the book actually hits the shelves. Okay, so in that 6 months, what is happening is the book is getting into final editorial. The art department's coming up with the cover. Somebody's coming up with the back copy for the book, right? And then towards the end of that process, I would say, the last 3 or 4 months before publication, uh, all sorts of things sort of need to happen in this universe, and it's evolved over time with ebooks and the internet and things like that. But getting the word out to your readers, your newsletter subscribers, your website, social media, booking engagements like tonight, and writing, being invited to write or talk somewhere. So that's basically it. But I won't say that. The other thing that's changed too is, even though that happens in the last 3 or 4 months, these days things don't end with publication. It used to be that you had that big release and then it was over, right? The bubble, the bubble pops. But these days, because of ebooks, books have like kind of an eternal shelf life almost, right? And so the the promotion and the marketing keeps happening months after that. And for example, because series have become more popular, when a series is done or uh, can be considered done in some way, like you've written about all four of the immediate family members, that's another marketing opportunity to, um, there's some readers who want to read the series back to back, and will hold off until they can have all the books together. Um, so I hope that answers the question. I think it's evolved and it's changed, and I think the expectations for the authors have changed too.
Yeah, your comment about ebooks. Oh, she says thanks. um, your comment about ebooks is true. I mean, the I know from a librarian perspective, trying to get, especially Harlequin, that puts out so many books each year, trying to get a book that came out last year, 2 years ago, to get this entire series together would have been impossible. Like to order all the books, the actual physical books. But as I said, Hoopla is a vendor that we use for ebooks, for our library patrons. So I could send them to Hoopla, and they could read all three books before before the next one becomes available. So it is something that it's like a digital shelf where we can always send patrons to read. So at any given time they can discover you. It's not just browsing the shelf, but they can discover you digitally, and just become a new fan. So it's a wonderful thing. It doesn't lose, as you said, it doesn't lose its shelf life because it's always there.
Yes, definitely. And, not only ebooks, but I discovered recently that I'd come out in, I was put out an audiobook in Germany. Yes. So their readers, that's the other part of this process. I also have come out in comic book and manga form. So people read in different formats, and it's increasingly become not just the physical book itself and the words in there, but the whole sort of penumbra around it of, different people using different, getting the same information or preferring the same information in different ways, whether it's a comic book or a foreign language or an audio book or, um, something else. There's a whole experience around it. And for some authors, that even includes merchandising, T-shirts and cups and anything that I think can be associated with the brand can also be associated with the book or a book series these days.
That is true. I'm a huge fan. Well, I'm a huge fan of audiobooks, but I'm also a huge fan of series. I tend to read them, and I do look forward to the next one where where am I going to like see these characters, especially if I fell in love with them as a secondary character in a previous novel. And so, yeah, I'm looking forward to reading your books. The Serengeti. I only started reading. I actually, and that bothers me because I was reading the third one in the series, the one right before this one that's coming out. Right before So Right with Mr. Wrong, but I think I might have to go back to the very beginning to get the full feel of it. So you convinced me. Only
Thank
that's
you.
me. I need to read in order.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Most, you know, to go back to what you mentioned earlier, uh, you know, people have asked me like, um, how do you come up with the books, the dialogue, and because my books are dialogue heavy, and they're, fast paced, I think, generally. And, I think that really comes from like inside the writer, like, you know, what do you like and what strikes you as funny, what strikes you as romantic, um, what strikes you as entertaining, and it really runs kind of for me like a movie reel, He said this, she said that, he said this, she said that. And it's always each line of dialogue, like what would that person say? What would that the other character parry with? What would be interesting or unexpected for that character to say that would carry the story forward, that would keep readers engaged, that would be entertaining, that might be a little enlightening, that might have people laugh or sigh or just come away with a good feeling.
Yes, that's exactly the kinds of books that I read. That's my preferred reading. You hit the nail on the head. So again, I'm probably going to go back to the very first one and then catch up. And hopefully by the time I catch up, because as I said, I read a lot for the library for work.
Right.
Then you might have the next one, the cousin book out. It might be coming out. I want to say thank you to Anna and good luck. So Right with Mr. Wrong comes out. I believe it's out digitally already. I saw, but it's coming out next Tuesday, April 13th. And again, through Hoopla for library patrons. And I just ordered a copy of So Right with Mr. Wrong. So it should be here soon in our collection, and it can be read. And thank you, of course, Anna, for participating with us today. And good luck. Just good luck with all your future books. And I will definitely be promoting your stuff. Some more.
Definitely. Thank you. Thank you for hosting me, Janet, and thank you for taking the time.